I swear to God. If it's just another possum. Ryan's boots slammed into the muddy creek bed as he yanked his flashlight from his belt. But the sound that answered him wasn't a hiss or scurry. It was a bark. Short, sharp, repeating. And not the panicked kind either. This was different, deliberate, commanding, echoing from deep inside the drainage pipe like it had a purpose. He froze mid-step, one foot sinking slightly into the slick, algae-covered rock. The narrow gully beside the underpass was half-choked with runoff and garbage, the smell of wet metal and mildew clinging to everything. And there, just past the torn shopping cart and tire husk, was the saucer dog wedged halfway into the blackness of the culvert. Its back legs were shaking, its ribs heaving with every breath, but it didn't turn around. It just kept barking, into the dark, into whatever was inside. Ryan turned slowly toward the woman behind him, barely visible in the blue glow haze of her phone light. It's not just stuck, he muttered. It's guarding something. Mira stepped down the embankment carefully, her brows furrowed. She was dressed too clean for this, pale green scrubs from her shift at the animal clinic, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and latex gloves. What kind of dog is it? She asked, voice low, as if afraid to break the tension. Lab mix, maybe shepherd. Not a stray look at the collar. Ryan crouched, squinting toward the dog's trembling back. But why won't it come out? The dog's tail was stiff, its whole posture rigid with a kind of defiance, not fear, not desperation. Something else. Ryan took a cautious step forward, his flashlight now angled toward the pipe's gaping mouth. The beam caught on wet stone, then rusted metal, then he stopped breathing for a moment. There was movement, small, in the shadows. Just beyond the dog's front paws. Something had flinched. Mira caught the shift too. Ryan, did you see that? He nodded. Yeah, something's alive in there. The dog finally looked back at them then, just for a heartbeat. Its eyes were rimmed with raw panic, but there was something pleading there too, something human. Then it turned back and let out a low growl, more warning than threat. Ryan whispered, it's not just guarding something, it's protecting someone. Myra didn't wait for permission. She slipped past him, crouching lower, her voice soft but firm. Hey, sweetheart, she called gently toward the dog. It's okay, we're here to help. Can you let us see what's inside? The dog didn't move. It crouched lower, then leaned forward again, nuzzling whatever was in the pipe. Myra tilted the flashlight and gasped, tiny fingers, 5 of them curled and barely visible, poking from a pile of soaked blankets and tattered grocery bags. Ryan staggered back. Is that a baby? Mira breathed. Oh my God, that's a baby. The dog gave a single sharp bark again, urgent now, as if telling them to do something. Then it whined, nudged the bundle gently with its nose, and curled tighter around it like a living shield. Mira's hands were already moving, reaching slowly into the darkness, murmuring to the dog in low tones like she'd done 1,000 times in the clinic with trauma cases. But this wasn't an injured pet. This was a guardian, a sentinel, and something had put that child in there. The wind picked up above the overpass, sending shudders through the rusted pipes and cold air down the gully. Mira glanced over her shoulder. We need an ambulance. An animal. Control. Now, Ryan nodded, pulling his phone with shaking hands, but his eyes never left the dog. Not even for a second. He didn't know what stunned him more, the child lying barely breathing in the filth, or the animal that had chosen not to run, not to eat, not to sleep, only to guard. And somewhere, far above the dripping storm drain and flickering streetlights, someone out there knew exactly how that baby had ended up in the dark, and why the dog hadn't left it. This was no accident. And it was only the beginning. The sirens came slow, as if the city above had no urgency left in it. Mira had wrapped the child in her own scrub top, damp and shaking in her arms. She sat cross-legged in the grass at the edge of the gully now. The infant pressed to her chest, whispering to it like she was afraid silence might let it slip away. The baby, no more than a few weeks old, hadn't cried once. Just those weak, fluttering breaths, lips pale blue and eyelids fused with dried tears and grime. Ryan knelt beside them, eyes flicking between the trembling bundle and the dog that had crawled out moments earlier and collapsed at Myra's feet. The dog was spent, muzzle muddy, sides heaving. It had refused help until the child was safe. Then, it simply gave up. There's no tag, Ryan murmured, wiping at the collar. No chip, nothing. Just this cheap nylon strap. Mira looked at him, eyes raw with something deeper than exhaustion. Someone didn't want it traced. He nodded slowly, trying not to let the weight of what they'd found settle too hard. But it was there. A baby bandit left in storm, run off under a highway. And a dog, half-starved and clinging to life, had done what no human had. A beat passed, then another. And Myra said, almost too quietly to hear, she has needle marks. Ryan's head snapped around. What Myra didn't, look up. She peeled back the blanket and gently touched the baby's thigh, revealing a faint cluster of punctures barely visible beneath the grime, old ones at least a few days old. Not from the cold, not from the fall. Someone injected her with something. Drugs, Ryan whispered, his voice gone hollow. I don't know, maybe. But whoever did this, her voice broke, just slightly, before she swallowed it. They weren't trying to keep her alive. The sirens came closer now, bouncing off the underpass walls, growing louder with each second. But Ryan no longer welcomed them. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an abandonment. It was something worse. The EMTs rushed in, all blue gloves and sharp commands, and Mira had to pry herself away to let them take over. The dog tried to follow, but stumbled, too weak to stand. Ryan scooped her up without thinking and held her tight as she whimpered quietly, as if afraid to cause trouble now that her job was done. An hour later, the floodlights washed the creek in sterile white. Police officers waded through the water, poking through garbage, bagging blankets and bottles. A detective arrived, all eyes sunken. A permanent scowl like life had already shown him the ending. He spoke to Myra while Ryan stood nearby with the dog resting in his arms, barely responsive. They'd wrapped her in a towel now, still damp, and Myra kept glancing at her like she was trying to figure out how much she could trust this world again. Any signs of forced entry? Anything suggesting who left her? The detective asked. No, Myra said, but this wasn't random. How can you be sure? Because that dog didn't leave her side, not for food, not for help, not even when she could barely breathe. That's not an accident. That's loyalty. Training. The detective paused. You think someone trained the dog to stay? I think someone left that baby there, and made sure the dog would never leave her, like it was part of a plan. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his arms aching from holding the dog so long, but he didn't put her down. The dog's ribs are showing. She hasn't eaten in days. The detective turned to him and grinned. Yet she stayed. Exactly, Ryan said. You don't get that kind of behavior from a stray. The detective frowned, muttered something into his radio, then turned to leave, but not before glancing at the baby being wheeled into the ambulance. If she pulls through, you might be looking at a case bigger than you realize. Mira didn't answer. She was staring back into the mouth of the culvert again, like it still held something they hadn't found. Later, in the quiet of the animal clinic's recovery room, Myra placed the dog, now dubbed Shadow, onto a heating pad. Ryan stood in the doorway, silent. The hum of machines and soft whir of air vents filled the silence, sterile and still. She never once barked at me, Mira said quietly. Just let me take her. She trusted you. No, Mira said, her voice low. She was told to. Ryan frowned. You think she was commanded to protect the baby? Mira nodded. I think someone wanted that baby to survive but not be found, not as easily, and the dog was the only thing keeping her alive long enough to matter. And then what? Ryan asked. They hoped a good Samaritan would stumble across her eventually. Maybe, or maybe they just didn't care if anyone did. Mira turned then, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely afraid. This wasn't desperation. It was execution. Ryan's stomach turned, but he said nothing. Shadow shifted on the pad, eyes barely open. She let out a soft whine, and Mira knelt beside her, gently stroking behind her ears. We'll keep her, she said. No matter what happens, she stays. Here, agreed. They stood there for a moment, the room too quiet, too clean, too far removed from the cold, wet pipe where it all began, and somewhere out there, the person who left that baby knew exactly what they'd done. They'd counted on the silence, the darkness, the forgetfulness of a city that never looked down, but they hadn't counted on a dog who refused to walk away. And now, the silence was cracking. The call came just after midnight. Ryan was still at the clinic, half asleep in the staff lounge with a paper cup of stale coffee cooling in his hand, when Myra burst in, phone trembling in her grip. Her face was pale, the kind of pale that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from something darker, fear, certainty. They ran the baby's blood work, she said, breathless. Ryan, she wasn't just abandoned, she was manufactured. He stood, heart thudding. What are you talking about? There were foreign substances in her system, synthetic compounds, some of them still unidentified, traces of immunosuppressants, and something the hospital's toxicologists couldn't even match to a known registry. She wasn't just left there to die. She was tested on. Words didn't make sense at first. Ryan blinked, trying to catch up. Like experimental drugs. Mira nodded. Multiple compounds, some injected, others may be ingested, but the baby's liver is struggling to filter it. She's hanging on, but barely. A long silence filled the room, broken only by the distant whir of a refrigeration unit behind them. Ryan swallowed hard. Then that dog didn't just save her, she exposed something. Myra looked at him, her voice sharp and hoarse. And someone's going to want that secret buried again. By morning, the news had reached local media. A newborn found in a drainage pipe, a heroic dog protecting her, the miraculous survival. But what the headlines didn't say, what Myra hadn't told the hospital PR rep, and Ryan hadn't mentioned to the detective, was the truth under the surface. That this wasn't a tragedy, it was a warning. Shadow had been sleeping in the back kennel when Mira returned to check on her, but she wasn't alone. A woman stood near the steel gate, her back half turned to the security camera. Long coat, surgical mask, dark gloves. One hand reached toward the latch. Myra froze in the hallway. Hey, can I help you? The woman jerked her hand back and turned slowly, too slowly. Sorry, she said, voice muffled under the mask. I thought this was the waiting area. No, Mira said firmly, stepping forward. You're in recovery. You shouldn't be back here. The woman tilted her head. I saw the dog on the news. Just wanted to see the hero up close. Mira's heart pounded, but she smiled politely. Not allowed. Please head back to the front desk. The woman gave a faint nod and walked past, disappearing through the doors without a word. Mira waited until the footsteps faded, then ran straight to the office, pulled the footage, called Ryan. She wasn't just curious. She whispered over the line. She was checking something. Looking for the dog. Then they know she's alive, Ryan said, and that the baby made it. Later that day, Detective Farrow returned to the clinic. This time, he didn't look tired, he looked grim. Hospital staff flagged something unusual, he said, sitting across from Myra and Ryan in the office. When they logged the baby's biometric data, it pinged an internal alert. Apparently the DNA markers matched a highly confidential registry. Mira's voice was barely audible. What kind of registry? Farrow hesitated, then leaned in. Not government, not officially at least, private sector. Bioengineering firm out of DC. Name doesn't show up in any public databases. The baby was likely part of a black budget trial. Off books probably. Not even legal. Ryan felt the air go thin. Are you saying this was some kind of lab test gone wrong? Farrow shook his head. Not gone wrong, covered up. Mira exhaled shakily. Then why abandon her at all? Maybe she was supposed to leave the lab. Maybe someone grew a conscience. They all looked at each other in silence. And the dog? Ryan asked. Farrow didn't blink. Professionally trained. Obedience at a military level. She wasn't a pet. She was assigned. Programmed to protect until death. Myra looked toward the back of the clinic, where Shadow lay resting under a heat lamp. Then someone chose her to guard that baby. Which means someone on the inside helped them escape, Farrow said. And someone else is trying to clean up the mess. The twist came 2 days later, when the baby opened her eyes. It happened during a routine check. One of the nurses was swabbing her lips when the infant blinked slow focused, not fluttering focused. She looked at me, the nurse said, stunned, like she recognized me. The pediatric neurologist confirmed what Myra and Ryan had already started to suspect, that infants' cognitive reflexes were far more advanced than normal. She tracked light, responded to sound patterns, even attempted to mimic a mouth movement once. She shouldn't be able to do any of this, Mira whispered, staring at the monitor. It's like her brain's wired faster. Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight. They weren't just experimenting with survival, they were trying to make something new. And the dog Shadow was the final proof that this wasn't a one-time crime. It was part of something bigger. Shadow was more than loyal. She had resisted sedation, responded to verbal cues no one had taught her, even seemed to track movement outside her enclosure before security systems picked it up. She wasn't just trained. She was altered too. That night, Myra drove alone to the hospital to check on the child again. She couldn't sleep, couldn't not go. But when she arrived, the front desk nurse looked up from her clipboard and froze. You're here to check on which baby? Mira hesitated. The one from the creek. The one brought in 3 nights ago. The nurse blinked. There's no baby under that intake record. What baby? Davis, right? The one with the unknown parents. She was transferred this morning. Federal custody. No forwarding information. Myra stood there, cold rising through her spine like a flood. No trace, no notice, no choice. And just like that, the child was gone, but the dog still remained, and so did the truth. The next morning, the clinic's security alarm tripped at 3:12 a.m. Ryan arrived 15 minutes later to find the rear door splintered at the frame, the lock twisted clean through. One of the ceiling cameras had been deliberately blacked out. The lights inside buzzed faintly, casting a sickly yellow pallor over overturned chairs and cabinet drawers left yawning open. But Shadow was still there, shaken, but unharmed, in the corner of her kennel, eyes wide, teeth bared, her body bristling with protective energy. Whoever had broken in hadn't come to steal medication or money. They had come for her. Mira arrived a few minutes later, breathless, still in pajama pants and a borrowed sheriff's department hoodie from the night before. She knelt beside Shadow's enclosure, heart pounding, her hand pressed to the dog's trembling side. She fought, she said softly. You can tell by her paws, there's blood. Ryan didn't speak. He was staring at the exit door ajar. Now its safety bar bent backward like it had been rammed from the inside. She chased them off. Myra nodded. She's still guarding someone. Ryan looked at her. Then we need to figure out who. That morning, Detective Farrow showed up unannounced. He stood in the lobby, arms crossed, his usual scowl now, accompanied by something called a worry. They're erasing the paper trail, he said, stepping into Myra's office. Hospital records wiped, security footage deleted, and that baby doesn't exist anymore. Myra stared at him. You're telling me a newborn child was disappeared by federal agents and there's no way to trace her? I'm saying it's already been buried. You have no idea who you're up against. But someone broke into my clinic last night, she snapped. They weren't cleaning up, they were hunting. Farrow gave her a long look. You're not wrong, but that dog, she's a liability now. She knows more than we do. Hell, she might remember more. Ryan stepped between them. She's not evidence she's a survivor, she's both, Pharaoh said. And right now, she's a target. By afternoon, Ryan had pulled a Faberon old contact at an independent animal behavior lab just outside the city, someone he trusted. They agreed to run discrete scans on Shadow, neurological mapping, chemical screenings, memory pattern testing. Nothing invasive, just data. The results came in the next day. She's been modified, the technician said, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know how else to say it. There are microfibers embedded in her neural sheath, synthetic filaments. Enhanced response speed, sensory perception. She's not just smart, she's wired. Myra stared at the scans. So she's what, an experiment? She's a prototype, the tech replied. If someone was trying to create the perfect protective asset, she's the result. But why pair her with a baby? Maybe the baby wasn't the only test subject. Later that night, Ryan sat on the floor of the kennel room, legs crossed, Shadow's head resting in his lap. She hadn't barked since the break-in, just stayed close, watching, waiting. I think she knows she failed, Mira said gently from the doorway. Ryan stroked her fur. She didn't. That baby's alive. Because of her. Then why do I feel like the real danger hasn't even started yet? Ryan looked up. Because someone went through all this trouble to hide that child. They didn't expect her to be found. And now they're trying to erase the evidence. Mira stepped into the room holding a worn folder in her hands. I've been doing my own digging, she said quietly, a whistleblower file. Anonymous. Buried in an old academic server. It mentioned a project named Bud based around epigenetic acceleration in early development, paired with embedded behavioral safeguards, meaning they weren't just making smarter babies, she said. They were giving them guardians, living ones, trained to bond, imprint, protect at all costs. Ryan's blood went cold. That baby and Shadow, they weren't thrown together. They were grown together. The twist came just after dusk. Ryan and Mira were closing up the clinic, trying to decide whether to move Shadow offsite for her safety, when a package arrived at the front desk. No return address, no signature. Inside was a flash drive and a single photograph. The photo was grainy, clearly taken from a surveillance feed. It showed a hallway, sterile, white, industrial, a woman in a lab coat, and behind her 4 large kennels. In each a dog, but only one was pressed to the bars, mouth open, eyes pleading. It was Shadow. Myra plugged in the flash drive without speaking, a single video file, time-stamped from 4 months ago. The footage showed a room part, nursery part, lab inside it, the baby, sleeping, monitored. A woman leaned over her gently, cooing something unheard. Then a man entered. Words were exchanged, whispered, panicked. Then a decision. The woman took the baby. The man opened Shadow's cage. And then they ran. Someone stole them, Ryan said. Someone tried to save them. And someone else, Mira said, voice cracking, wants that erased. They looked at Shadow. Her ears had perked. She was staring at the screen, and for the first time since they'd met her, she growled. Not in fear, on memory, in recognition. Whatever had started in that lab hadn't ended in the drainage pipe, and now the trail was reopening. The house sat quiet at the edge of the tree line, flanked by shadows and thick summer air. A gravel road led to the front porch, weeds pressing up between the stones like nature was trying to reclaim it. Ryan cut the headlights and let the truck idle. The silence between him and Mira felt heavy, thick with everything they weren't saying. In the back seat, Shadow stood alert, nose to the window, tail still, not wagging, not nervous, just waiting. This is the woman from the footage, Myra said, her voice low, the one who took the baby and released Shadow. I traced the lab's personnel list through the whistleblower's metadata. Her name is Eleanor Shaw. She disappeared a week after the child vanished. No resignation, no last paycheck, just ... gone. Ryan stared up at the dark windows. You think she's here? I think she's all that's left. They stepped out into the stillness, boots crunching on gravel, Shadow trailing behind like a silent soldier. Ryan knocked twice, no answer. Then a third time, harder. Footsteps. A curtain moved upstairs. The door opened slowly. Eleanor stood in the doorway, hair shorter than in the video, eyes sunken with the kind of wear that no amount of sleep can fix. Her gaze went first to Shadow, then to Mira. She didn't speak. She just stepped back and let them in. The living room was modest. Worn armchairs, dusty books, a cold cup of tea left forgotten on the windowsill. On the coffee table sat a photo Shadow, curled beside the infant on a lab mat, both of them asleep under sterile light. The caption scrawled in pen, Day 41, Bond confirmed. Eleanor sat down slowly. They weren't supposed to survive. Mira's throat tightened. The baby, Eleanor, nodded. They told us she wouldn't live past 6 weeks, that the genetic loading was unstable. But she did. She exceeded every threshold. She felt she reached for the people who held her, responded to pain, comfort, music, and the dog, Ryan asked. She was always at her side, Eleanor whispered. We paired them in utero. Shadow's litter, whereas engineered to imprint through pheromone exposure. Only 3 dogs survived the birth. Only one met the baby's scent threshold. She chose her, never left her side again. Eleanor looked at the dog, now older, worn, but still fiercely present. And when the order came to terminate the project, I couldn't do it. Mira's voice cracked. So you ran. I stole them. I had 60 minutes before security protocols triggered. I planned to leave the country. But we didn't make it far. Someone was already watching. She pulled something from her Paquita small cloth bracelet, frayed and dirty. It had once been on the baby's ankle. I left her in the pipe because I had no choice. I thought maybe someone kind would find her before the rain came and you stayed hidden. Ryan asked. Eleanor nodded. They would have killed us all if they knew she'd survived. The room was silent, broken only by the occasional chirp of night insects outside. Then Eleanor said, "Where is she?" Mira hesitated. "They took her to a federal agency. No trail, no records. She's gone again." Eleanor turned away. Her shoulders sagged. Her breath caught in her chest. "Then everything I did was for nothing." "No," Myra said. "You saved her once, and so did Shadow." The dog moved then slowly, deliberately up to Eleanor's knees. She rested her head on the woman's lap. And there, in the soft touch of fur against trembling hands, something unspoken passed between them. Eleanor let herself cry the next morning. The three of them stood by the drainage pipe where it had all begun. The city had already moved on. There were no news vans now, no sirens, just water trickling through rusted grates and a crow watching from the fence post. Myra crouched down and placed the baby's bracelet in the reeds. "She existed," she said softly, "and whatever she becomes, she'll never be forgotten." Ryan stood beside her, hand on Shadow's leash. "We can't protect her anymore, but we can protect the truth." They didn't say goodbye to Eleanor. She had made her own path, one carved in silence and sacrifice. But Shadow stayed with them. She trotted away from the pipe, tail lifted, now her stride steady, like she knew her job wasn't finished. Because the world didn't need another mystery. It needed a witness. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in Myra's mailbox. No return address, no signature. Just a photo, newer this time. The child, alive, maybe 7 months old now. She was holding a stuffed toy, smiling, healthy. On the back, a single sentence, typed, "She remembers the dog." The story never made national news. No one stormed the lab, no lawsuits, no press conferences. But Myra and Ryan kept telling the truth to anyone who'd listen. About the night the dog barked from a pipe until someone came. About the baby in the blankets. About what it means to protect something, not because you were ordered to, but because it was right. Shadow lived out her days at the clinic. She never barked at another soul. She didn't need to. She'd already said everything she needed to, and long after the world moved on, people remembered the sound of one dog, barking in the dark, not to be rescued, but to save.